Here's my point of view. When someone says to you the words high school English class, what is the first dreaded thing you think of as you begin your journey of indulging yourself in complex literature? Shakespeare. Dreaded Shakespeare. But why do we as students have this awful image of Shakespeare and his literary works put into our heads? It may be because of the hard-to-read Old English that we as millennials have shortened to BRB and LOL. Or maybe it's because of the next to impossible plot lines that we would think, I don't think my mother would ever marry my uncle, or I don't think I would ever go so insane that I would kill everyone due to my paranoia. Some would argue it is absolutely pointless to learn and read Shakespeare because we as students will never use it again. So should we even bother with learning Shakespeare? Would this opinion that has begun to circulate change if we began to indulge ourselves in all of Shakespeare's greatest works? Would this opinion change if we began to notice the lessons that we can learn from Shakespeare? Let's analyze this through the play of Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Hamlet, one of Shakespeare's most memorable plays. You know which one I'm talking about. Allow me to enlighten you. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and sorrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them? To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life, for who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make, with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have, than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience makes us cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. This is a soliloquy from Act 3, Scene 1 of Hamlet. One of the most infamous soliloquies to date because of the truth and honesty this brings out, not only in the play but in reality as well. Through these words, we see the darkness and emotion of the act and play come to life as Hamlet essentially inquires, why would anyone live through these treacherous sorrows when you can let yourself go and be free of these burdens? And now you're thinking, how can I relate to such nonsense? Well, really, it's not so much nonsense. I'll do a close reading of this passage to show you the full meaning behind this soliloquy. In the first line, we have this question of to be or not to be, Act 3, Scene 1, line 62, which Hamlet is essentially debating throughout his whole speech that he does. This meaning, do I end my life and let myself be free of these sorrows that I'm encountering? Or do I continue to fight and live? Hamlet says next to die, to sleep, no more. Act 3, Scene 1, line 66 to 67. Here, Hamlet is comparing death to sleep, which is what he believes it is. Hamlet expresses how death is merely a long sleep, as you may have dreams which could become afterlife. He says that what comes after death is what scares us all, and as he puts it, thus conscience does make cowards of us all. Act 3, Scene 1, line 89. He expresses how this consciousness that we have of potential afterlife makes us fear death, as we do not know entirely what life is after death. All in all, this soliloquy brings out key themes in the play, and this, if we can interpret it correctly, can help us learn things that we can apply to life. The decision Hamlet makes, spoiler alert, is to continue to live to seek revenge for his father, as this is the ultimate goal. But what we can learn from this soliloquy of to be or not to be, is if we do ask ourselves this question, which in hard times we all eventually will at one point or another, is essentially to be and to live and to conquer your demons and sorrows as Hamlet did, and to accomplish the goals you want to accomplish despite the unfortunate happenings of the present. Although, if you have a similar goal as Hamlet, which is to kill your uncle for revenge, I would highly recommend you find a different goal to achieve. Unfortunately, due to the influence of social media on mental health, many people have developed mental illnesses such as depression that deprives them of making the right decision here. So, what I'm suggesting is that maybe instead of indulging ourselves into Snapchat or Instagram, we spend more time reading Shakespeare in school and learning the meanings of the points Shakespeare was trying to put forth. Maybe there would be a lower rate of depression. This is a very far stretch, but hey, there's an argument there. The point being here is that this is a valuable lesson on beginning to find yourself and your worth, which Hamlet has shown throughout the soliloquy. So now, at this point, I'm hoping you are intrigued, maybe thinking, wow, maybe she's right. Well, here's another lesson we can learn from Hamlet. Fragility of life. Yes, I'm sure we all know that life is precious, and I'm not about to lecture you on this, but hear me out. Although the major death that begins the whole play is Hamlet's father's death, this is not the death I'll be focusing on. The death of Ophelia is what brings out the true emotion. After that same soliloquy I just read to you, Hamlet is met with Ophelia, but let's rewind first. In the beginning of the play, Hamlet emphasizes his love and affection for Ophelia. Ophelia says as quote, "My lord, he hath importuned me with love, in honorable fashion." Act 1, Scene 3, lines 114 to 115. Hamlet loved Ophelia, but unfortunately his vaulting ambition, which drove him to madness, had gotten in his way. So now that we're caught up, after the soliloquy I just read, Hamlet emphasizes how not in love with her he was. Confusing, right? This makes us question, was he really in love with her? So, fragility of life. Where do we see this? Well, in Act 4, Scene 7, Queen Gertrude says that as Ophelia was climbing a tree, the branch she was on had snapped and she fell into the lake and drowned, causing her death. Hamlet, when he hears this, is absolutely heartbroken, as we see when he says, "I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum. What wilt thou do for her?" Act 4, Scene 7, lines 224 to 226. Hamlet explains how much he loved Ophelia, so much that the amount of love 40,000 brothers could give could not outweigh his own. This theme of fragility of life is shown when we identify the last words he had spoken to his love, Ophelia, was that he did not love her anymore. Hamlet did not get to express what he had wanted to her, which makes him feel remorse and guilt. Is this the same in reality? Of course. After a death of a loved one or a friend, or even just an acquaintance, we begin to think of all the things we should have said, or all the things we were going to say but didn't. Fragility of life. We take advantage of life too often and we never know what could happen, i.e., an accidental drowning. It's a tough subject that Shakespeare puts forth, but this could help us to learn to take those chances, say what you mean, feel what you feel, because you never know when it'll be too late. Okay, so, two themes of fragility of life and to be or not to be. Let's make it an even 3. Revenge. So someone hurts your best friend, and your friend asks you to hurt them so that you guys can be even. Do you do it? This is the idea of seeking revenge, which accumulates in Hamlet. We find out that Hamlet's uncle killed Hamlet's father. Hamlet then talks to the ghost of his father, which we can only assume is real at this point, but that's a discussion for another time. King Hamlet's ghost tells Prince Hamlet to seek revenge for him, to kill his uncle. As anyone with a decent relationship with their father would, you'd do anything to make your father happy, so Hamlet was off on his goal to seek revenge for his father. Although, in Act 1, Hamlet did not seem very eager to act on his plan to seek revenge, as he was very caught up in his own emotions, so he kept his plan very conserved. But as the play goes on, we see Hamlet explode with rage and vaulting ambition to kill his uncle when he impulsively stabs Polonius in Act 4. Although this does not stop him from achieving his goal. In the end of the play, he is poisoned by his uncle, and in the middle of his slow death, stabs his uncle with another poisoned sword, ultimately achieving his goal of killing his uncle. The lip is, he also dies. And here we have the phenomenon of karma. Karma is defined as the sum of a person's actions viewed as deciding their fate. Although Hamlet did achieve his revenge that he desired, he also died in the making. Karma. So this theme of seeking revenge we can learn from as well. Before we act impulsively to create that feeling of, we're even now, this makes us think, what are the consequences of this action? I read this article by a brilliant writer, Francis Bacon, and I won't bore you with it, but here's a line in the passage that I think relates to what I'm trying to get across here. This is certain that a man that studieth revenge keeps his own wounds green, which otherwise would heal and do well. This line in the passage sums up what the author's intentions of the article was. The meaning of this line is essentially, a man that seeks revenge will always get in return what he accomplishes, but a man that avoids revenge will keep on living and doing well. Therefore, lesson learned. It's much easier to avoid revenge than seek it, as seen by the karma given to Hamlet after he seeks his own revenge for his father. The last thing I will mention is this fact that I find pretty interesting. Shakespeare has been around for over 500 years. All of his works are so intelligently written. Whether we know it or not, we are quoting Shakespeare every day. In a novel I read called How to Read Literature Like a Professor, the author Thomas C. Foster says, "He's everywhere, in every literary form you can think of, and he's never the same. Every age and every writer reinvents its own Shakespeare." This idea of Shakespeare being a part of our everyday lives is amazing to me because we as humans are oblivious to the fact that we read Shakespeare whenever we read a novel, as it could be based around a Shakespearean plot. We quote Shakespeare wherever we go, and he's all around us. When we read Shakespeare, it helps us expand our knowledge of literature. It helps us to make new connections between pieces of literature and creates that aha moment when you finally find where that quote was from or with who that character resembles. Shakespeare is everywhere, so if he is already in our lives, why do we dread reading his works? Altogether, what we have here are three really important life lessons that are most obviously shown in Hamlet. The lesson finding your worth and choosing to fight through your demons and sorrows. The lesson of how fragile one's life can be, so let people know how you feel. And the last lesson of not seeking revenge, for karma will get you back. All of these can be applied to your real life and are honestly quite valuable lessons to learn. So back to the question, should we even bother with continuing to learn and read Shakespeare, specifically Hamlet? I vote yes. Why wouldn't we want to indulge ourselves in learning possible life lessons that could help us in the future? Why wouldn't we want to expand our knowledge of literature and help us further connect to other works? Why wouldn't we want to keep our minds working, happy, and healthy? To anyone that would not like to have any of these assets is beyond me, but in my research and my argument, we should continue to learn the brilliance of Shakespeare works. And I hope you can see the benefits of him after my talk with you today.